Hi, this is Lyndall with Watery Wishes, and today I have an art journal for you. So if you don't mind long videos, because this one's just under 27 minutes, I suggest you stop watching. But if you do wish to stay, I hope you enjoy. So I created a mask using some print paper and some Tombow. And I was originally going to do the bottom where I've masked using distress inks, but things happened which changed all that, so I ended up using acrylic paints down there instead. So as you can see, I'm putting distress oxides everywhere, and I'm doing this because I'm creating a galaxy background. I'm trying to pick colours that don't muddy when put next to each other, although the Mermaid Lagoon and the Candied Apple does go a little bit dark, but that's okay because I'm going to cover it up mostly with a bit of blueprint sketch and some black soot. So the colours I used in the background for the galaxy are Wilted Violet, Picked Raspberry, Mermaid Lagoon, Candied Apple and Squeezed Lemonade, and then I'm going over it with a bit of blueprint sketch and some black soot. And then I will come back in with some of the colours to brighten them back up a bit, but I don't come back in with the Candied Apple because that red is so strong. And my sponge was really juicy because I had a new sponge and I made sure I inked it up really well. So as you can see here, I got a bit of the pattern from the paper towel after spraying, so I just went over it again with a little bit of black soot. And now I'm just flicking some water on with my hands, which should prevent me from getting that pattern when I remove it with the paper towel. Now I'm using a little bit of white acrylic paint, just school grade stuff you buy in the big 2-litre bottles, to flick on some stars. And I'm using an Amazon box as a splatter box here, but later on in the journal I don't use it and I end up with gold splatter everywhere. So here I've got a bit of the Nouveau Platinum Mousse, and I'm using that to create some splatter as well. I use a lot of the Nouveau Mousse throughout this project in various ways. So here I am. I was planning to put a mask over the oxides, and I'd created it and I put it down, and I hadn't let my Tombow glue dry well enough, so it's very hard to see now, but there were tiny tears in the paper which I went back over with some black soot distress oxide to cover them up. So I got a bit of that on the masked area, and I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to use acrylics because acrylics would go over that black soot. And I was using white Dilutions paint just then, but it wasn't covering up the black soot well enough. So I got out some of my white gesso, my Dina Wakley white gesso, and I'm just covering that up so that you can't see that black underneath. Now I'm going over it with some grey because I'm creating a moon surface, and I didn't really wait for the gesso to dry, and that's fine. I just put a little bit of black acrylic there, and I'm mixing the black acrylic with a little bit of the gesso to give me that base grey colour. And now I'm laying in some craters with a little bit darker mixture of that gesso and some black acrylic paint, which is also some Dilutions paint. And here I'm just roughing them in. They don't have to be perfect. You're going to have a lot more going on in the background later on, and it will sort of all balance out. And as you can see, they're getting smaller in the distance. Now I'm roughing in a little bit of black paint mixed with the tiny little bit of that white gesso. And here I'm just trying to give them a bit of a rim on that edge, bit of a shadow. And here I am just smoothing bits over with my finger. Helps to get rid of some of those paint brush strokes. Now here I'm bringing in some Copic markers in C1, C3 and C5, very little C5, and I'm stippling all over the acrylic paint. It's dried and I wanted to bring a little bit of texture to the piece. This is wholly unnecessary. I didn't have to do it, and I know it looks really bright and vivid right now, but I'm going to do a couple of things to set it back a bit further. I'm going to go over the whole thing with the C1 marker, which sort of drowns it out a little bit, which you'll see in a moment. But it still leaves some of it there. See, it pushes some of that back a bit. And that's fine. And now I'm just going over the edge with a little bit of, this is Distress ink in Squeeze Lemonade. It might be the oxide. Don't know. Could be the ink, could be the oxide. I'll have all the main products that I use linked down below. Now here I'm using some Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide, and I'm mixing it with some gel medium because I wanted to paint with it. Now this is what I'm doing to push that moon back a little bit, and it's going to pick up a little bit of that yellow as well from the Squeeze Lemonade, but that's okay. And I'm finding that it's leaving too many brush strokes, so I get a sponge out, and I thought I was going to have to make up some more, but I sort of got the sponge and I got as much out of the brush as I could because the sponge was soaking a lot of it up. And now I'm just dabbing it on, and that helps push back some of that bright white light grey, and gives it a bit more texture and a bit more variation in colour. Now I'm using some gel medium to just seal in those oxides in the back. This will also help take a bit of that chalkiness away from the oxides, and it makes them shine a little bit more. Gives a little bit more depth to the scene. Now I'm stamping out my mermaids from the recent the mermaid set, which is Beautiful Mermaids from the recent Simon Says Stamp card kit. I'm using archival ink for these, but I wish I had used some VersaFine, as the archival doesn't seem to come out as black. And I'm going to be watercolouring these. Now, what I've done here is I've used some of that platinum mousse, that Nouveau Platinum mousse, and I've mixed it in with some of my watercolor paints to give me that shimmery metallic paint look. And it actually works really well. It does dull the color, so you have to have a really nice concentration of color to add it to. And it's really hard to see what it looks like as I'm putting it down flat like this, but I do move the cardstock later once it's dried, and you'll see that shimmer that it gives off. So I'm using the mousse in the gold that I'm using for the mermaid's tails, and I'm using it in their hair, and I'm using it on their little shell tops and the starfish and the beads and the shell in the mermaid's hair. There, I just had a little bit too much in my paintbrush, so I just took a bit off on the side of the cardstock. I stamped these on, this is on Canson XL watercolor paper. It's on the smooth side. So these are quite thick, and I am going to be fussy cutting them out. See that shimmer in that paint? It's very subtle, but it's much like most metallic paints that you can buy. And I can't afford to buy all the paints, so I'm just being creative and making my own with that embellishment mousse, that from Nouveau. And it works quite well. I haven't got any other colours, I've only got the platinum. And later on I paint some of them on some black cardstock, and you'll be able to see how they work like an interference colour on the black cardstock. The effect is quite nice. Probably not as good as some of the metallic paints you can buy out there, but still pretty decent. So if you can't afford to buy all the paints and you want to try some metallic watercolors, try getting some of this platinum mousse and mixing that with some of your regular watercolors. I would just suggest that if you do, don't mix the colors in the pan. Use a clean brush to grab the color out of the watercolor pan and onto another surface or palette, and don't use your really expensive watercolor brushes, because the little particles of mica will probably get in there. And I'm no expert in watercolor brushes, but I believe that those mica particles will probably break down the bristles after a while. Now, I'm just using regular watercolor, and I created a skin tone for their skin, very light pale skin. I figured if they're in space, they're not getting much sunlight. I figured they might be a little corpse-like in color, so I only did their skin very pale. And I'm trying to match that rock with the color of the acrylic paint that I used in my journal. So that's why you can see me bringing the journal over to that image so that I can judge whether it is close enough or not. Here I'm just going over the paint with a second coat just to darken it up. I really love that shimmer. And it's it's not really like watercoloring, it's more like paint, really. Like, I mean, I didn't really use any watercoloring techniques for this, even though technically I am using watercolors. So, and as you can see, that's all the messy stuff I've got there, and here is where I get gold sparkly stuff all over my desk. So yeah, it's everywhere. So now I've just got a little bit more of that silver, the embossing boost. I'm moving it around and I'm putting some more silver there. And because down the bottom is acrylic, I can just sort of wipe it over. And as you saw there, it was those paints on the black cardstock. They make really good interference colours for painting on dark surfaces. Now I've stamped out some images from the Lawn Fawn Out of This World stamp set, just some planets and some stars. And I'm using some of the leftover paint with that mousse. The great thing about this glass mat is you can put crap all over it like that and it just cleans up so easy. As you can see, it's a little bit dried and I'm just sort of reconstituting it a little bit. And it does that fine. That was a few hours after I originally created it. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend doing this in your palette, like in the palette that the watercolors come in, but definitely on a plate or a laminated surface or any other sort of plastic palette that you're willing to rinse out afterwards. You should really give it a go. It's definitely worth a try. I was really happy with the way this turned out. Now I'm just using some gel medium to get my images down on the page, and as you can see, I've gone around the edges with a memento marker, and I do that from the back side just so that I don't get any black lines through my painstakingly painted images. And as you can see, that background, it doesn't have that chalkiness that the oxides usually, it's got a little bit, but not as much. That gel medium has sort of created a little bit of depth with those oxides so they don't look so matte. Sticking down all the things. I'm sort of trying to vary the orientation of the planets a little bit. Now here is my custom affirmation, I suppose. It's not really a sentiment. It says, don't let other people's expectations limit your reality. And I felt that was very fitting for Mermaids in Space. Because it's definitely not what people expect. So here I'm trying to get everything glued down. Now I stamped the larger expectations and reality in the Wilted Violet Distress Oxide. Now I shouldn't have done that, because later on you'll see I go over it with some gel medium and it bleeds. It bleeds badly. Now I really need to purchase some of the archival inks in some nice bright colours, but I haven't got around to it. So here I am using a Posca paint pen to go around the sentiments. I sort of stuff up a little bit with the, well, first of all, I rubbed and smudged a little bit of the Posca paint pen, which I actually fix by going in with one of my Pit brush pens, the NC, and it brings it up and then I can get it off. I have no idea whether that hurts the Pit brush pens, so I wouldn't recommend doing it, or doing it, you know, at your own risk. Now I'm just going around the mermaids a little bit, and as you can see, the yaw isn't really legible because I've sort of stuffed up. So I actually write that out using a memento marker on another piece of printer paper, and I tape it back over. Not tape, I use the gel medium to go back over it. And then I didn't film it, but off camera I do go around it again with the Posca marker, because I forgot to do that when I was filming. So I did colour it purple like the others. And it's quite funny. The shading around the images looks a lot darker in this footage than it actually looks in real life. It's a bit strange. So here I'm just shading in a little bit of that area that was blank, and this is the mistake. I went over it with some gel medium because I wanted to colour it, and it bled and it looked horrible. And because I stuck that other yaw down, I have to go over the rest of them with the memento marker, which looks fine. Here I am trying to get in focus it's a Wink of Stella silver glitter brush, and the gel medium didn't seal that top one properly, so now it's soaked into the cardstock, making it look even worse. Here is a gold Wink of Stella marker, which I'm just going over the tails and the stars to give them more shimmer and shine, because space scenes and mermaids can't have enough glittery, shimmery shine. Now, this is just the clear Wink of Stella, going over the planets with it to give them even more shimmery shine. Now I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with this. I get out my memento marker and I try and fix it that way. That's not working. So I get out an alcohol marker, a black one, and I go over all the letters with the alcohol marker, and that silver in the background is still annoying the crap out of me, so I'm not happy with it. I'm happy with where it says reality, I'm just not happy with the expectations, and I don't want to have to cut it out again. So now I'm going over it with a purple Pit artist marker. And now I'm going to try a gel pen. And I don't particularly like the gel pen either. So I go over it with a white paint pen, a white Posca paint pen. Now, I've ordered some small ones with smaller nibs, a black and a white one, but they haven't come yet. So I end up going over it with one with a fairly large nib. And it's not perfect, but it's legible. And it's better than it was. And I could have redone it and put another bit of cardstock over it. But that sort of defeats the purpose of art journals. To me, an art journal is experimentation and, learning your materials. So I got it to a point where I was okay with it, and that's fine. So that's the art journal page. And here are some images. You can see a little bit of that shimmer on the planets. I hope you enjoyed this art journal. If you did, hit that like button. If you didn't, hit the dislike button. Either or is good. I'd love it if you subscribed. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And don't forget, have fun crafting your imagination. Bye.